The alien queen fired 15 nannies in 2 months, and now she mocked the janitor who dared to stand in her throne room. Why is a servant holding a mop where generals should kneel? Chancellor Doreen's voice cracked across the crystalline chamber, every syllable dripping with disdain. The nobles burst into laughter, jeweled collars sparkling like shards of ice. Their voices carried, sharp and merciless, filling every vaulted corner with mockery. But Darius Holt didn't bow. A janitor should have lowered his head, should have shrunk beneath alien cruelty, but he stood tall, mop upright like a staff. The contradiction unsettled them more than his silence. Where are you watching from? Because what happens next rewrites everything they thought they knew about him. Beside him, Mira pressed against his patched uniform. Her mismatched eyes, one bright as a star, the other brown as earth, were wet with tears. The laughter dug into her, reopening wounds carved by every cruel word in these halls. Too alien for humans, too human for aliens. She turned her face into his side, as if hiding could make the jeers stop. Darius laid a steady hand on her shoulder. His palm was rough, scarred by work and loss. He thought of her mother, gone now, and of the promise he'd made to protect their child, no matter how many crowns mocked them. That old wound throbbed quietly, but he didn't let it show. They see a janitor, he thought, eyes steady on the nobles. But they'll learn what a father will do when his child bleeds under their laughter. A hush fell when he finally spoke. Strange thing about Jules. His voice was calm, carrying in the chamber without effort. Even the brightest dull if no one cares for the floor beneath them. The words landed like a crack across glass. For a heartbeat, silence. Then nervous laughter, thinner than before. Nobles glanced to one another, uncertain whether they should sneer or stay quiet. You'll want to see how the moment they mocked him turned into a galaxy-wide reckoning. The narrator's whisper could have been carved into that pause, because somehow, with nothing but a mop, the janitor had shifted the air. Queen Velara leaned forward, her crown of living crystal glowing faintly in rhythm with her heartbeat. A human with philosophy, she murmured, voice low but sharp. Do I keep you for cleaning, or for riddles? He didn't reply. He simply stood, calm, unshakable. Mira peeked from behind his arm, her trembling slowing, her father's steadiness seeping into her. One alien youth across the chamber pointed at her, laughing. Look at its eyes, one star, one mud, a mistake that breathes. The courtiers laughed again, sharper, crueler. Darius's chest burned, but his face stayed still. He bent down slowly, so he was level with Mira. Do you know what matters? He whispered only for her. Not what they call us. What we carry forward, our steps, our hands, our care. Her tears quivered but didn't fall. She nodded, small chin lifting, trying to match his strength. He rose again, mop in hand, shadow stretching long across the crystalline floor. For a moment, it looked less like the silhouette of a servant and more like a soldier. Chancellor Duran sneered louder, forcing the laughter to rise again. If humans had pride, they'd have left long ago. Instead, they mop floors. The queen smirked, though at her side, her infant heir stirred restlessly in his star-forged cradle. The hybrid child whimpered faintly, but the nobles didn't notice. Their attention was fixed on the humiliation. Mira did. She tugged at her father's sleeve. Papa, the baby's sad. Darius's eyes flicked to the cradle. The sound, the broken rhythm of the child's breath, stirred something deep inside him. He recognized it instantly, though he prayed he was wrong. He swept the mop across the floor, deliberate, patient. Each stroke echoed like a heartbeat beneath the queen's jeweled shoes. To the nobles, it was nothing. To him, it was memory. A rhythm he'd known in darker places, when star cores trembled and fleets depended on steady hands. Fury pressed at the back of his throat, but he swallowed it. Not yet, not here. Let them laugh. Let them believe they had crushed him. Because when the palace walls began to tremble, when the cradle's harmonic field faltered and the infant's whimpers turned into silence, they would discover the truth. The man they mocked for carrying a mop was the only one who could carry them all through the storm. They thought he was only a janitor. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The throne room's laughter still echoed in Darius Holt's ears long after the crowd had dispersed. Mira walked close at his side, her small hand clutching his sleeve as they slipped into the quieter arteries of the palace. The crystalline corridors hummed faintly, like a living body breathing through its walls. Each step seemed to whisper the noble's words back at him. Creature, mistake, janitor. He guided Mira toward the kitchens, where the scents of roasted grains and spiced oils masked the cruelty of the court above. The bustle here was different, quieter, earthier. Alien servants, most of them low-born, kept their eyes down but not their ears shut. Everyone had heard what happened in the throne chamber. Mira slid onto a stool by the wall, pulling her knees up and tucking her face into them. Darius reached for a cloth and wiped his hands slowly, fighting down the tightness in his chest. He could endure their scorn, but his daughter shouldn't have to carry its weight. A cook with scaled arms glanced over from her steaming pots. She didn't sneer the way the nobles did. Instead, her eyes lingered on Darius's stance. Too upright for a beaten man, too steady for someone supposed to be small. "You should have bowed," she muttered, not unkindly. "Would have." Spared the child, Darius looked at Mira. "If I bow now, she'll spend her life learning how." The cook frowned, stirring her pot, but said nothing more. Still, whispers traveled fast. Two younger attendants in the corner exchanged glances. "Strange for a janitor," one said softly. "The way he stood." The way the queen paused. "Not just strange," the other replied. "My uncle once served on the outer fleets. He said some humans guided starships through living storms. Navigators, they were called. They vanished when the wars ended." The first snorted. "And you think a mop carrier is one of them?" Darius didn't look their way, but his jaw tightened. He had spent years burying that name, Navigator. The title had nearly killed him once, and it had cost Mira's mother her life. If the palace discovered what he'd been, he and his daughter would be more than mocked. They'd be targeted. Mira lifted her head slightly. "Papa," she whispered, "what's a navigator?" His heart stilled. He crouched beside her, keeping his voice low. "It's just a story, Mira. A story of people who helped others find their way when no one else could. Nothing more." She studied him with those mismatched eyes as if she didn't believe him. Children had a way of hearing truths in silences. The cook returned with a bowl of broth and placed it in front of Mira. "Eat," she said gruffly. Then, softer, "Your father stood taller than any noble today." Don't forget that Mira gave a small smile, lifting the spoon with trembling fingers. Darius met the cook's eyes briefly. It was the closest thing to respect he'd been given since stepping into the palace. He leaned against the wall, watching his daughter sip the broth. Her fragility reminded him of the queen's infant, Prince Irix. That child's whimpering rhythm had stirred something in him earlier, something too familiar to dismiss. The wound of memory pressed harder. The night spent balancing on the edge of imploding star cores, guiding fleets through collapsing wormholes with nothing but instinct and training. He closed his eyes. Those days were supposed to be behind him. He was just a janitor now, a father trying to keep his child alive in a palace that wanted her broken. But fate had a way of circling back. The attendants kept whispering, "If he is a navigator, then the queen will never let him go. She'll use him until he breaks or kill him before he threatens her pride," the other added. Their words seeped into the stones. Darius heard them, every syllable. He pretended not to. His mop leaned against the wall, unremarkable, yet more dangerous than they could imagine if the truth ever surfaced. Mira finished her broth and leaned against him, her eyelids heavy. He brushed her hair back gently, his chest tightening with a quiet promise. Whatever storms came, he would shield her from their full force. The palace trembled faintly as if echoing that vow. Somewhere above, the cradle chambers hummed with unstable energy, and the queen's child whimpered again. Darius opened his eyes, staring into the glow of the crystalline walls. His secret was bleeding closer to the surface, whether he wanted it or not. And when the next crisis struck, he knew there would be no hiding. The palace feast glittered like a star field, every dish glowing faintly under the harmonic walls. Nobles dined on crystal platters while choirs of sound weavers laced the air with song. Mira sat quietly beside her father at the servants' fringe of the banquet, small and silent, her mismatched eyes downcast. Darius Holt kept his mop nearby, leaning against the wall like a reminder of where the court thought he belonged. Queen Valera presided from her dais, her infant heir, Prince Irix, nestled in a star-forged cradle at her side. The child cooed faintly, his voice lost beneath laughter and music. Nobles paraded jewels that could buy moons, raising glasses in mock toasts as if the janitor's humiliation were still the evening's best entertainment. Darius said nothing. His mind never left the rhythm he'd heard earlier, the child's fragile breathing out of sync with the cradle's resonance. He felt the unease pressing like a weight in his chest, but he didn't yet have proof. Not enough to act. The Chancellor noticed his silence and pounced. "Careful, Your Majesty," Duran sneered, his jeweled fingers lifting a cup. "If we keep the human too close, he may think himself more than a floor scrubber. Perhaps he fancies himself a healer next," the nobles roared with cruel delight. Mira's cheeks burned. She glanced at her father, waiting for a reaction, but Darius only placed a calming hand on her shoulder. His expression never shifted, though behind his eyes calculation ran like fire through circuits. Then the music faltered. A high-pitched whine bled through the chamber, so faint most ignored it, until the cradle's glow stuttered. Prince Irix whimpered, his tiny chest heaving unevenly. The queen leaned forward sharply. "What is this?" she demanded. The whine became a low hum, vibrating the crystalline floor beneath their feet. Darius froze. He knew that sound. He had lived in it once, guiding fleets through storms of collapsing gravity wells. "Resonance imbalance," his mind whispered, though no alien here would understand. The infant gasped, body trembling. Panic rippled through the court. Nobles dropped their cups, scrambling back from the dais. The sound weavers fled, their harmonics scattering into chaos. "Summon the medics," Queen Valera shouted, lifting her child from the cradle. The babe's skin flickered with shifting light, half alien luminescence, half human pallor. Medics rushed in, their sleek instruments unfolding like silver wings. They pressed devices against the child, chanting diagnoses in alien tongues. None of it steadied his failing breath. The cradle's harmonic core pulsed, wildly, shards of sound crashing through the hall. A dish shattered, wine spilling like blood across the floor. Mira clapped her hands over her ears, whimpering. Darius didn't move at first. He watched, waiting for someone, anyone, to understand. But he saw it in their frantic eyes. They were blind. None of them recognized the pattern. None had ever stood where he once had, staring down the collapse of a star core. The Queen's voice cracked, raw with fear. "Save him!" The medics tried. Their tools sparked, their chants faltered. The hum rose higher, drilling into the skull. Mira tugged at her father's sleeve. "Papa, please, the baby." The wound tore open inside him. He remembered the night Mira's mother had died, how alien arrogance had cost her life. He saw the same arrogance now, courtiers too proud to admit they didn't know what to do. Something in him snapped. He pushed to his feet, stepping forward. "Stay back!" A guard barked, leveling a spear, but Darius's eyes locked on the cradle, on the oscillations dancing like fire through the crystal. He knew this language. He had lived it. "Your Majesty," he said, voice steady even as chaos swallowed the hall. "The cradle's harmonics are tearing him apart. If you keep pushing tech into him, he won't last another minute." The Queen spun toward him, her crown blazing. "You dare—" "He'll die," Darius cut in, his voice louder now, sharper, "unless someone grounds the resonance." Right now, the medics froze. The Chancellor sneered, and what would a janitor know of such things? Darius ignored him. He strode toward the cradle, each step ringing with authority that didn't belong to a servant. The guard hesitated, spear trembling, because in Darius's eyes there was no hesitation, only command. He grabbed his mop. To the court, it was nothing but wood and steel. To him, it was exactly the conductor he needed. He plunged its shaft against the crystal floor, aligning it with the cradle's pulse. The vibration changed instantly. The shrieking hum softened into a rhythm. The infant's breathing steadied fractionally, color returning to his cheeks. Gasps erupted around the hall. The Queen's eyes widened, torn between fury and dawning realization. Her son lived because of him. Darius lifted the mop slightly, recalibrating with the instinct of a navigator long thought extinct. Each adjustment calmed the storm a little more. The palace walls themselves seemed to sigh in relief. Mira clung to the edge of his uniform, staring at him as if seeing her father for the first time. Not just a janitor, not just a man surviving humiliation. Something more. The nobles watched in stunned silence, every jewel and crown dulled against the sight of a human servant saving the air with nothing but a mop. When the hum finally settled into harmony, Darius straightened, sweat beading his brow. The infant cooed softly, alive, his small hand curling against his mother's robes. The hall was silent. Only the Queen's unsteady breathing filled the air. And in that silence, the galaxy began to see that the man they mocked was the only one who understood the storm. "You thought he was only a janitor," the narrator's voice cut in, sharp as lightning. But when alien brilliance failed, his human hands held the air of an empire. The silence after the storm was heavier than the chaos itself. Nobles clutched jeweled cups with trembling hands, their eyes fixed not on the Queen, not even on the infant, but on the human janitor standing with a mop in his grasp. Darius Holt's chest rose and fell, slow and steady, as though he hadn't just bent the palace's heart back into rhythm. Sweat ran down his brow, but his eyes were calm. He lowered the mop's shaft from the cradle, the steel tip still humming faintly from the harmonics it had absorbed. Queen Velara cradled her son, her fingers shaking as she checked his breathing. Prince Irix cooed weakly, his tiny hands curling around the folds of her robe. Alive, stable, for now. The Queen's lips parted as though she might thank him, but pride clamped her mouth shut. Instead, she raised her gaze, burning like a blade. "What did you do?" Every noble leaned forward, desperate to know the same. Darius met her stare without flinching. "I stopped the resonance tearing him apart. Your cradle sings too loud for a body half human." Gasps rippled through the chamber. The words were simple, but the certainty in his tone cut deeper than any medic's chant. Chancellor Duran pushed forward, his robes rustling. "Impossible. That's forbidden knowledge. No janitor could—" He stopped himself, but too late. The seed of doubt had already been planted. The Queen's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Who are you, human?" Darius said nothing. His hand tightened on the mop, the humble tool gleaming faintly as though mocking the court's luxuries. The silence stretched. One of the younger attendants from the kitchens, standing at the back, blurted without thinking. "Navigator." The word cracked through the air like lightning. Nobles turned, hissing and whispering. Velara's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" The attendant paled, but the word was already alive. Navigator, a title from the old wars spoken in fear and awe. The caste that guided fleets through dying suns vanished when empires no longer needed them. Legends dressed in human faces. Dren sneered, desperate to contain the ripple. "A lie! He is nothing but a floor scrubber." But the Queen's gaze sharpened. She had seen the cradle calm in his hands, seen her son's color return where medics had failed. Lies could not erase that truth. Mira clutched her father's sleeve, her small voice trembling. "Papa?" He crouched to her, resting a hand against her hair. His eyes softened. "It doesn't matter what they call me," he murmured. "It matters what I do for you." But when he rose, his gaze was steel. The Queen stepped down from her dais, her crystal crown glowing brighter with each step. She stopped a breath away, her voice a mix of anger and reluctant awe. "If you are navigator, why hide as a janitor?" Darius didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. The cradle pulsed faintly again, though softer now. He set the mop's shaft against it once more, stabilizing it with the ease of someone born to such patterns. Nobles stared, watching a servant wield a cleaning tool as if it were an instrument of cosmic order. The contradiction was unbearable. Their arrogance fractured under it. Drian sputtered, "He's dangerous, Majesty." "Humans like him?" "Humans like him just saved your heir," a noblewoman snapped, silencing him. Gasps echoed again. The ripple had become a wave. The Queen's jaw clenched. For the first time, her voice wavered. "You forced my court to witness, and I cannot unsee it." Darius said nothing. He didn't want power, didn't want a throne. All he wanted was Mira safe. Yet the truth had broken free, and no crown could stuff it back down. Mira looked up at him with wide eyes, wonder fighting fear. She saw him not just as her father, not just as the man who mopped alien floors, but as something more, someone the galaxy would never laugh at again. The nobles' whispers swelled into an unsteady chorus. Navigator, janitor, human, father. Which name would the palace choose? Darius stood in their glow, mop in hand, calm as ever. His dignity was a weapon sharper than their jeweled blades. And in that fragile pause, one truth sang louder than the palace walls. They could not unmake what they had just witnessed. You thought humiliation was the end of him. The narrator's voice cut like thunder. But tonight they discovered the storm had been standing in their palace all along. The council chamber glowed like a living constellation. Dozens of crystal spires curved into the dome above, each one humming in resonance with the moons orbiting outside. Nobles filled every seat, their voices already sharp with speculation. The word navigator had spread like wildfire through the palace, no matter how hard Chancellor Duran tried to smother it. At the center, Darius Holt stood with Mira at his side. His mop leaned against his shoulder, humble and ordinary. Yet no one could look at it now without remembering the way it had stilled the Queen's heir's failing breath. The contradiction unsettled them more than the silence he carried. Queen Velara sat upon her elevated throne, her infant son cooing weakly in her arms. Though the child lived, her pride bore the wound of the court's laughter turning to awe for a human servant. Her eyes burned on Darius as if she could strip the truth from his bones. Duran slammed a staff against the floor, his voice cutting through the chamber. "We gather, because this man has broken the order of our palace, a servant who meddles in matters far beyond his station. He risked the heir's life with a mop." He spat the word like poison. Gasps rippled. Some agreed. Others shifted uneasily, unwilling to forget what they had seen. Darius's eyes swept the chamber. He didn't speak. His silence made them restless. A noble woman rose. "But the heir lived. I saw the cradle faltering, and none of your medics could stop it. Only he could," Duran snarled, robes billowing. "Coincidence. Tricks of a desperate man." The cook from the kitchens, summoned as a witness, stepped forward hesitantly. Her scaled arms shook, but her voice carried. "Coincidence does not steady resonance. I saw him stand taller than any noble when the chamber laughed, and I saw the child's breath return when his mop touched the floor." Whispers surged louder. The word navigator returned. Heavier this time, undeniable. Queen Velara's crown pulsed faintly, her expression tight. "Enough riddles. Speak the truth, human. What are you?" Every eye turned to him. Mira's hand clutched his sleeve, her small fingers digging in. He looked down at her, then back at the Queen. His voice was steady, even. "I was navigator. Once, long ago. But now I am father and janitor. That's enough." The chamber exploded in shouts, some outraged, some astonished. Duran leapt forward, spitting fury. "Dangerous! Navigators defied the Dominion itself. You'll bring ruin if you let him stay. Cast him out before he poisons the bloodline further." But his words rang weaker now, drowned by the murmurs swelling in favor of the man they had seen succeed where the Empire's finest had failed. Mira looked up at her father with wide eyes. Pride shimmered through her fear. For the first time, she wasn't ashamed of his patched uniform or his mop. She saw him as he truly was. The Queen lifted her hand, silencing the chamber. She stared at Darius, her voice cutting through the noise. "You should not exist. Yet you do. You should not have saved him. Yet you did. The court must decide whether this truth strengthens us or destroys us." The nobles argued, voices crashing like storm waves. Some demanded his exile, others insisted he be honored. The tide was shifting, unstable as the resonance he had calmed. Darius didn't plead, he didn't argue. He simply rested his hand on the mop, standing tall, letting the weight of his dignity do what no words could. His silence was louder than their fury. The Queen's gaze flicked to her son, then back to him. For the first time, hesitation cracked her proud mask. She had seen death hovering over her child. She had seen who had driven it back, and she could not unsee it. The trial was not over. The verdict loomed. But already the ripple had begun. In kitchens, corridors, and now the council itself, whispers spread of a human janitor who carried storms in his silence. The mop gleamed faintly in the chamber's glow. No longer a servant's tool, but a symbol the court couldn't erase. "You thought exposure would break him," the narrator's voice carved into the moment. But the trial revealed what humiliation never could. The storm they mocked was already reshaping their empire. The council chamber still rang with the echoes of argument. Nobles shouted for exile, for chains, for silence. Others spoke of honor, of survival owed to a man they had mocked. The air pulsed with division, every word heavy as stone. At the center, Darius Holt stood unmoved. His patched uniform clung to him like a second skin, his mop steady at his side. Mira leaned against his arm, her mismatched eyes wide but unafraid. The chaos around them was the storm, but he was its calm eye. Queen Velara rose slowly from her throne. The chamber fell quiet. Every crystal spire above dimmed, as if the moons themselves leaned in to listen. She carried her son in her arms, the infant breathing steady now, small chest rising and falling in fragile rhythm. She descended the dais steps, each one deliberate, her crown glowing faintly with living light. She stopped a breath away from Darius. The silence between them stretched long, heavier than any accusation. Her voice was low, raw, with a truth she could no longer deny. "You saved my heir when all my empire failed." The nobles murmured, stunned by her words. "But you shamed me before my court," she continued, her eyes sharp. "You forced us to see weakness in our pride. And for that I cannot forgive you." Fully Mira pressed closer to her father. The weight of judgment pressed like a blade over their heads. Then, to the astonishment of all, Queen Velara bowed her head. Not fully, not as one bows to an equal, but enough to mark recognition. Enough to shatter centuries of arrogance in a single gesture. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Some nobles looked horrified, others lowered their eyes, compelled by example. "You are Janitor," she said, voice steadier now. "You are father, and you are more." The court will remember this day Darius did not answer. He did not gloat. He simply bent, set his mop gently against the cradle at her side, and stepped back. The humble tool, worn and patched, now hummed faintly with the resonance it had steadied. It stood there like an unshakable witness, a symbol that truth could not be buried under jewels or crowns. He took Mira's hand. "Come," he said quietly. As they turned to leave, whispers swelled like a tide. Navigator, janitor, father, storm. The queen watched them go, her son clutching her robe with tiny fingers. She looked once more at the mop standing in the cradle, and for the first time, pride cracked into something else, something closer to humility. The chamber doors opened. Darius and Mira walked out together, steps slow but steady into the luminous corridor. Behind them, an empire shifted. Ahead of them, only the unknown. For Mira, the humiliation was gone. She looked up at her father with new eyes, seeing not just the man who cleaned floors, but the man who could calm storms. Her small hand tightened around his, and he squeezed back. He had not sought power. He had not demanded a crown. All he had wanted was her dignity restored, her place in the galaxy safe, and somehow, in saving another child, he had saved his own. The palace walls hummed softly as if echoing their departure. Not with mockery now, but with respect. "You thought he was only a janitor," the narrator's voice lingered, soft and final. "But when arrogance broke, he restored more than a child's breath. He restored the dignity of an entire people." Darius paused at the great door, looking back only once. The mop still stood in the cradle, gleaming faintly under starlight, left behind as both memory and warning. He whispered for Mira alone, though the cosmos seemed to hear it too. "We carry forward." And together, father and daughter stepped into the night of twin moons, leaving the court forever changed.